Hey everyone, it's Jenny from JC Cards, and thanks so much for joining me today. I know it's been a while, and today I'm joining you as part of a video hop hosted by Altenew celebrating their most recent release. There are prizes to be won if you're watching this before the entry date. All of the details are in the video description box below, as well as the next stop on the hop, so be sure to check out that description box, as well as for all the supplies I used on my video today. Today I'm going to be featuring two cards that both use this amazing Ranunculus 3D embossing folder that came out in the most recent release. This is so three-dimensional. It's an absolutely gorgeous floral, and you can get some amazing techniques and looks using embossing folders. Both of my cards today feature the same technique. You might have seen Jennifer Maguire featuring it recently. I've done a little twist on it for my cards today to get two different looks. So I've added some opaque inks onto my craft mat, and I'm just blending them very slightly with a brayer before applying them directly onto my embossing folder. I've got it opened out and I'm applying them onto the flat side of the embossing folder, so you'll see where it is indented the ink doesn't adhere. I'm then going to add my cardstock into the embossing folder. I'm using some handmade watercolor paper. It's quite sturdy. It's not quite cardstock. I'm going to close up that folder, being careful not to shift my cardstock, and then run it through my die cutting machine. And you'll see that where the ink was on the embossing folder, it presses into that watercolor cardstock, giving quite a subtle pale look, and the bit that is the image has no ink on it, so it gives this really nice dimensional look. Now I'm going to show you this one more time. This time I've added the inks by swiping them directly onto the embossing folder, and then I'm going to add in a panel of spicy yogurt cardstock and run it through my die cutting machine. For these embossing folders, I'm using my Spellbinders Platinum 6 machine. I just use one plate on top of the embossing folder. They are very thick due to the 3D look. I'm taking that first panel with the more subtle pale ink, and I'm spritzing it quite liberally with my spritzer, and then I'm going to dry it. And what that does is it blends those inks together, but it doesn't quite run into that embossed image, and that way you get this gorgeous subtle pale look with that beautiful kind of white shaded 3D ranunculus. Now for my second piece, I got much more bolder colours by applying directly onto the embossing folder. I'm going to really emphasise that ranunculus by running a ink pad over the top of it, and it'll just very gently, it will catch the tops of those raised areas on the embossing folder, and you can see it really just adds some dimension, and that's before I do any sort of additional colouring in. Now I'm using my metallic watercolours here. Remember, I'm not using watercolour cardstock on this one, so it's not going to be able to take too much water. And the metallic watercolours, you only need a little bit of water to add the colour. So I'm taking advantage of that, because that way, by not having them too liquid, they're not going to run into all those nooks and crannies if I don't want them to. And I can use these watercolours to paint that image. So I'm using a variety of the purple metallic, the red metallic, and then the gold metallic to paint in the image. And it'll give this gorgeous shimmery sheen and shine to that ranunculus image. This is quite a bold look, I think you'll agree, in comparison to that first one, and I'll show you them in a little bit side by side. I do go in and add a few water splatters, and then because I wasn't quite happy with how that colour had blended on the embossing folder, I went in with a damp brush. These are the Altenew watercolour brushes. I think this is a size 2 round, and just went round the edge of that ranunculus and blended in that colour. I added a few splatters just for good measure, and then for dimension I added some fun foam to the back with some adhesive. It is double-sided adhesive and liquid glue. And then because I didn't want to cut into my floral image, I'm using 5x7 note cards here. These are much bigger than your standard A2 4¼ by 5½ inches, and I will trim them down off camera just to add a border around the edge. Now for my sentiments, I'm using the Fairy Tale Florals stamp set that also came out in this recent release, and I like these. You can mix and match the sentiments, so I'm doing that on my mini MISTI, and then I'm going to ink them up with one of my favourite black inks to stamp sentiments with. This is the Obsidian Pigment Ink from Altenew, and then I'm just going to pop those onto the front of my now trimmed down cards with some foam tape. And look at the gorgeous colour and the way that metallic watercolour catches the light. It's just beautiful. For the paler one, I'm going to go in and add a few nuvo drops. These are clear glitter nuvo drops, just in a few places for a little bit of subtle shine. And that finishes my second card. And you can see them side by side. Even though I really barely changed my materials and the look, the technique, the looks are very different. Be sure to head on over to the next stop on the hop, and if you don't already subscribe to my channel, consider giving me a click and subscribe and hit that bell to be reminded when I do have a new video, which I hope to have some more coming soon. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.